Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? All good in terms of sound?
Yeah.
All right, all right. Okay, logistics are ready. We're almost set to get started with our session number 3. I'm excited about today. I love session 3. I think you're going to enjoy as well. There's a reason I really enjoyed this one because we're going to be discussing the thing I actually do basically every week. It's maybe I'm going to be biased again, maybe the hardest topic in product management. We're going to be discussing prioritization, making decisions. We're going to be talking about vision, telling a story. We're going to be talking about strategy, choosing the opportunities to get to our goals. We're going to be talking about roadmap, how to make a plan to achieve that vision and that mission. So there's a lot of stuff to cover today. It's going to be packed. As usual, I don't think any session isn't packed. That's the goal. That's why you're here. It's why it's 4 weeks of intense content. And today's not going to be any different. And by the end of today, I'm also going to be announcing our guest speaker for Thursday. I'm very, very excited with this person. We'll talk more about that in the end. It's kind of my Marvel lend scene credit approach. Like you stick until the end, you get to be the first to know who you're going to be speaking with on Thursday. That's the goal. Meanwhile, just going to wait a few extra minutes for more people to join. As you know, this is being recorded, so you'll always have access to the content if you're a couple of minutes late. But it's much better to see this in person, I think. In person. Zoom is the new in person, as you all know. But I'm excited about today. I love this because I think the difference between this session and all others is that I think I bring a lot more examples of the real world with today's session. I feel, at least that's the feedback I got in the past. I mix it with frameworks and theory, of course, but I think that reality clash today makes this one a very, very interesting session. Okay, as you know, we'll do a break in between. You already know the gist of this. Like, they're not new anymore, like almost experts on 1 PM. And I bet some of you will join other programs next year. I'm excited. There's so much new stuff. We're launching, by the way, just a quick plug. We're launching data for product managers starting early next year. It's going to be amazing, especially if you understand the importance of managing and handling data, from querying to visualizations to asking the right questions and getting the right answers through data. We have an amazing program prepared next year. I'm also inviting, and this is what I actually do, is I always invite people from foundations to go for growth and no code. I think those are nowadays essential skills to have. I think both growth, go to market, growing products, as well as no code, like being independent to build your own products, your tests, your experiments. I think they're basically crucial nowadays. If you don't have that, you don't have almost your foundations complete. I might eventually build like a bundle program that includes like a bunch of programs at the same time, and you do it like this, turning into something complex. We'll see what we do with this. But we have awesome stuff coming up. If we get this done, we might be launching even more stuff. We might be launching product marketing next year. We might be launching design sprinting next year. I'm trying very hard to launch Taught by Me, head of product. So product leadership program. That's going to be awesome. Takes a long time to build a new program, by the way. I want to give a lot of credit to the people teaching all programs at 1 PM because they're amazing. But this takes a lot of work. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you guys enjoy this, that's worth it. I mean, that's the goal. Cool. All right, let's get started with today. Let me get to my slides in 2 seconds. Tell me if you can see them. All good? You see a massive 1 PM logo? Yeah? All right, I got used to this logo. All right, cool. Thank you for the thumbs up again. I usually say this. I have been saying this for maybe a year. But last week, for those who didn't join last week's Lunch and Learn, we have David. He was a former product manager at Twitter. I really recommend you watching that Lunch and Learn because it was really cool. But, and this is a promise, on the day I have a product manager from Zoom here, I'm actually going to send an invite to the entire alumni community of 1 PM to join, because I want to do so many questions to Zoom PMs, like so many questions. I'm going to try to get the person who built the thumbs up the virtual one because I want to both clap because that person is amazing, very much used feature, but I also want to ask the frustration of dealing with people who do like this, who go like this. And just ask, do you feel okay? Do you sleep okay knowing there are people in the world who thumbs up analog version on Zoom? As a joke, but I can feel the pain in that person's eyes. I gotta find the person. Okay, stop with digression. Let's go to the content. That's why you're here. Welcome to session number 3 of 1 PM. We're past our midway. We're past the half point of our foundations program. I hope you're enjoying so far this program. Today's episode is going to be no different from others. It's going to be packed fast. But before, as usual, we got to do a quick recap of last week. So on the last episode, we looked into a very important first step of the product process, discovery and validation. And this is what you need to do to get to that beautiful moment called product market fit. Beautiful. By the way, on the last session next week, we are going to be talking about success measurement. One of the frameworks I'm going to be giving you for success measurement is around finding and analyzing product market fit. It's going to be framework number 1. We'll talk more about that next week because last week we talked about the process, what you need to kick off, discovery, validation. We talked about jobs to be done and we compared it to personas and how job stories are an amazing tool to capture the scenarios, situations, motivations, the anxieties, and what your prospective customers expect to achieve with your product. We also talked about 2 frameworks, Value Map Canvas and the customer profiling that comes with Value Map Canvas, and the opportunity solution trees from Teresa Torres. Both give you a blueprint of what your solution space could be because it's based on a customer-centric problem space. Then we talked about prototyping and testing, the validation part, and how most of features that don't work or products that fail come from not prototyping, not testing with users, not listening to them. And we also discussed different techniques of prototyping and how prototyping is the best tool to assess the risk, ideally the risks that you already mapped, as we saw in the first session. And we saw different approaches, both to the back end, to the front end, to how everything comes together to build something that really gets you proper data for you to make great decisions. So that's kind of it. Before we go into today's session, any questions, anything that wasn't clear? Now's the time. If not, nothing. Let's give a couple seconds. Okay, Carlos, you have a question. Go for it.
Yeah, so it was related with a question that someone asked at the end of the last session.
All right.
If I remember, someone asked if the product manager should design mockups. And related with the opportunity solutions review, it was not clear. We discussed what was supposed to do on each one of those layers of the opportunity solution review, but it was not clear what's the involvement of the product manager in each one of those layers.
All right.
Is he responsible for each one of those lanes, or in some, probably the bottom part, it's more like a project manager responsibility?
All right. I think, Carlos, those are 2 very important questions. And I think there's a similar answer to both. First, of course, it depends, obviously, because it depends where this product manager is inserted, what type of team they have around them. But I'll step back and answer in a different way, which is success of a PM is solving the problem, right? Building the product to solve the problem is the path, is the way, is your strategy, right? Ideally, you want to build a product that you've tested against customers, right? The less you test, the more likely is that you're building a product that doesn't solve the problem correctly. Now, if you believe that testing the product via prototypes, via wireframes, via mockups in front of customers is a necessary step, and you have no one to do this, then yes, the product manager should be in charge of doing it because that's the way they optimize the probability of solving the problem correctly, right? Of course, that puts the PM in a discomfort area because maybe they're not a designer, maybe they're not used to this. But honestly, it's better to do something scrappy and not looking very good, but do something and learn from that than doing nothing, jumping straight into engineering, probably, and then spending time and money building something that you haven't tested, that you actually don't know. You might know the known knowns, maybe some known unknowns, but you don't know the unknown unknowns that you couldn't figure out. So my recommendation is that independently of who's available, yes, a PM might or might not. In the situation that you do have maybe a designer or even maybe a researcher or someone who could prototype from an engineering perspective, then of course, if you believe that's the best area to invest those resources, then of course you could decentralize that and put that responsibility on them, so you can focus on other things, from organizing customer, from organizing feedback, from running stakeholder assessment and discovery. All of those things you can do while the rest of the team is handling prototyping or mock-up or wireframing. What matters is it happens independently of who's there. So that's my it depends answer. In terms of the tree, I think it's the same answer, right? If you believe that filling up that tree, problem space and opportunity space, is key to know what to build, and if there's no one else, then of course the PM should be. I think for the tree, actually, the PM should always be involved in the entirety of the tree, whether if it's them brainstorming and ideating on the solution space, if it's them documenting and codifying the opportunity space. Again, it depends on who's available or not, but I think the PM should be very close to that process, because they will have eventually to defend that for stakeholders, for management, for leadership, for founders, dependently on who you report to or who you deal with. So I think those two answer your question, I hope, Carlos. Do you feel that they answered?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Awesome. Any more questions? We're good to get started? Awesome. Let's go. So we've done quite a few things. So remember, by now, you've landed on an opportunity and solution tree that gave you different approaches to prototype, to test, to experiment. And ideally, by the end, you got to a value proposition that you believe could be the V1, either of your product or of a specific feature. You can apply these frameworks to any type of scope, an entire product, a small feature, anything. This works, right? You're there. But you still have a lot of stuff and you have limited resources, right? You can't do everything. That's why prioritizing, making decisions really, really matters. Actually, if we step back, we can ask, why does prioritizing the limited resources we have really matters? Why can't we just do everything one thing at a time? Well, because if you remember on our first session, your goal as a product manager, your job is to design and execute a strategy that increases the value gap, that gets costs coming down and value going up at the same time. Why? That is the question we didn't ask in the beginning. Now I give you the answer. The reason is that value gap is known in economic theory as customer perceived value. Customer perceived value is the difference between the benefits that the customer perceives from looking at the product and subtracting the price. It's the difference, the delta, what they pay versus how much they value. Of course, a product that has more perceived benefits versus price is a more valuable product. That means people will be happier with it. They'll retain, they'll probably tell others. That's how you drive customer adoption. And there's a direct connection between that value gap and that delta. Now, don't forget that your objective as a PM, and that's layer number 2 of the goal of a PM, is to help the company achieve their goals. Now, every company has a single goal, become more valuable, drive more shareholder return. You can immediately see on this equation that there's one very, very easy way to increase the delta between price and customer benefits, which is to drop the price. But dropping the price, maintaining the cost, will give you a lower margin. That makes the company less valuable, right? So the company is not going to allow you to do that. So the only way you get to achieve both objectives, helping the company, maintaining or growing the margin, difference between the price and the cost, and maintaining or growing the customer perceived value, is by improving that value gap, delivering more products so that the customer benefit goes up and the price can either stay or even go up, increasing the margin, but never losing the perceived value. And you have to do that with limited resources. And the only way to achieve that is through prioritization, is choosing first the things that have the highest impact for the resources you have, and on and on and on. That's the goal. Of course, There are hundreds of ways to prioritize. I'm not joking. This is just a snapshot of some prioritization frameworks, just some. You can multiply these by maybe 5 or 10. These are how many frameworks you have. Now, we're not going to cover all of them, all right? There's some funny ones here. There's literally dart throwing, where companies throw a dart. I'm not joking. Throw a dart for the initiatives. This is not unheard of. There's the HIPPO. The HIPPO is known as the highest paid person's opinion, which correlates with the boss. And the boss makes the decisions. Again, not unheard of, more common than you think. But we're not going to focus on those. We're going to focus on 4 specific frameworks: North Star, prioritization matrix, RICE, and Moscow. 4 frameworks that follow a process, number of steps that will give you a proper, complete process to make decisions. All right, that's the goal. Step number 1. Oh, by the way, bit of a digression. Why? Why do we use frameworks? Why don't we, as product managers, lords of knowledge and wisdom, owners of the product, decide? Well, because you're going to be dealing with a lot of different people. And I'm not even talking about designers and engineers. I'm talking about the stakeholders. You're going to be dealing with finance people, marketing people, operations people, managers, founders, boards, investors, customers. All of them have their own agenda, their own reasoning why something matters more than anything else, right? So if you start making decisions, and those decisions oftentimes are zero sum, meaning that if you do something, you don't do something else. It's very easy to become the most hated person in an organization, the product manager, especially the product leader. Very easy. Why? Because you're going to be saying no to a lot of people for a long, long time. It kind of reminds them of their mothers when they were young, saying no all the time. Not joking, this is true. And it creates a trigger on people. But you have to say no because you can't do everything, right? Using a framework outsources the reasoning for the no. Instead of you, the person, the PM saying no, it's the framework saying no. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So that's the reason why frameworks really matter for a decision-making process. Otherwise, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be attacked and you really don't want to. All right, that's the goal. Okay, let's jump to our step number 1 of using frameworks. So the first one is North Star. And the first step is to define a strong North Star. Now, the definition of North Star is one measurement, a single metric that is most predictive of a company's long-term success today. That matters. I'll explain in a minute. And a North Star helps rally people, helps rally everyone around you, the team, the stakeholders, the investors, the founders, everyone's rallying around that North Star. Predictive of a company's long-term success means that if that metric, that North Star grows, automatically the company becomes more valuable because it's something that is accepted by everyone. Again, the market, the investors, that North Star correlates with value. And what I mean with today is that North Stars can change over time as the business matures, as maybe you change your business, you pivot your business model, or maybe because you achieve a new stage. All of that might influence a North Star. North Stars are not like missions who tend not to change, or they change very rarely. North Star should be open to change because you always want to make sure that you're chasing a metric that correlates with success, right? That's the first step of our prioritization. We gotta define and know our North Star. It's often that founders or even management or leadership tends to define that North Star rather than the PM because it's a company-wide metric, right? But it's important that it exists. So you know what is the common denominator of decisions. It's the North Star. Now, if you look at some famous North Stars or metrics that make some companies more valuable, you could say rides for Uber or nights for Airbnb. The more they do, the more valuable they are because they also extract revenue out of each one of these units of North Star. You could look at paying subscribers of Netflix or daily active users of Facebook or documents uploaded on Dropbox, transactions that were paid on Square, seats on Salesforce, the gross merchandising value on Amazon. All of these are known North Stars, right? When they grow, the company becomes more valuable. Actually, if you look at the earning calls of these companies, they're all public companies, right? So if you look at the earning calls, you'll always see these North Stars actually mentioned on the earning calls. They look at showing the growth of that number to justify that the company should be more valuable. That's it. But what you also see is that when they fail on that number, the market punishes these companies. You saw that a couple of quarters ago when Netflix reported the first drop of subscribers in the last decade. And suddenly the stock fell 25% on a single day. Same happened with Facebook. When Facebook again reported a drop in daily active users, stock went down 30%. So all of this shows how important is the North Star for the market, for the teams, for the company, because it correlates with value. You'd expect, oh no, what matters is revenue or profit or margins or earnings per share. But you'd be surprised how often the market looks more towards this North Star, because it's an easy metric to understand. That's also the beauty about North Stars, is instead of Airbnb going to the company and saying, our goal is to get X% EBITDA margin, or to achieve X amount of profitability, or a specific gross margin, which are complex accounting numbers and metrics, right? They'll say, guys, our objective is to achieve X amount of nights, or a growth year over year of X nights booked. That's much easier to consume and to act. Are you doing something that will influence our ability to grow nights? Makes it easier. The beauty of a North Star metric is it makes it simpler for teams to act and to validate whether their decisions actually fits and aligns with that North Star. Right, that's the goal with North Stars. If you actually look at Tesla's strategy, and we're going to be talking about strategy in a few minutes, but if you think about why and how Tesla grew as a company, you'd see that the entire strategy of Tesla is connected to a single North Star, which is to grow the number of delivered electric vehicles. Right, that's their North Star. And if they think about how can you achieve the maximum amount of electric vehicles, they know that they need an accessible car. Now, they won't sacrifice sustainability. So they started with a low volume car, which would be expensive, right? Because they didn't have economies of scale. They didn't have the factories, and they needed someone to pay so that they could go to step number 2, which is using that money to develop a more affordable car that grows the addressable market, again, sustainably as economies of scale grew. Why? Because they wanted to get to step number 3, to create a more affordable car that effectively grows the addressable market. And again, all other cars are paying for this specific car, in this case, Model 3. So every single part of Tesla's product strategy is aligned with the North Star of growing the number of people who can access the electric vehicle so that they can grow the deliveries and eventually outpace the number of cars in the street, electric cars in the street versus non-electric cars in the street. Everything is connected to that North Star. This is why designing and developing and knowing the North Star really matters. And again, if the North Star, which is more common, not created by the PM, it's very important that it is made clear, and that North Star influences your decision-making process. João is asking, don't they all translate to revenue? Yes, they all translate to revenue. Ideally, hopefully the company generates revenue, right? They should all translate to revenue. If you actually look at the examples we have here, more rides at Uber, meaning more revenue because you make revenue out of a ride. Nights, the same. Paying subscribers on Netflix, more revenue. More daily active users, maintaining the same conversion of clicks in ads, more clicks in ads, more revenue generated. Dropbox, the same. More documents, more space. And if you pay per space, more money. Transactions on Square, they take a fee. If you think about seats, each company pays a price per seat, more revenue. GMV, Amazon takes a cut of every euro, aka GMV, transacted. more revenue. But again, revenue as a metric is much harder to understand. Different products have different approaches, different ways of generating revenue, different margins. This way, you make it simple for the company to understand what they're running against. Clear? I hope, João, I answered to your question. I'm going to go with no news equal good news. All right, cool. Thank you. What's step number 2? So North Star step number 1, what's step number 2? Step number 2 is about quantifying priorities, right? Because we saw on our discovery exercise how we're going to be creating a large solution space, right? And even if we prioritize some things, because we believe we have some confidence, etc., we got to still make some quantification decisions, right? Especially because you will probably be facing people across a company that say, why? Why is this thing coming first? Why not this? Why this idea that is not mine versus my idea, my requirement? I like to use RISE, which is an acronym that stands for 4 things. Reach, which is the number of people or events that your product will reach in a period of time. And this is calculated literally in absolute terms. How many users, how many clients do you believe? Impact, how much an initiative, a feature, will move the needle that that feature is trying to move. Remember that each feature or initiative will probably tackle different metrics. What you want to quantify here is from 0 to 10, how much do you believe that feature will move that specific feature? And then before I go to confidence, I go to efforts. Effort is the amount of time, the estimation of time from everyone involved in the development of that specific feature, right? You have these 3, reach times impact dividing by effort. But remember, reach, impact, and effort are estimations. You don't actually know today. And how much you know depends on how much research, how much data, how much experience you have building that, right? All of that will be different. So RISE adds an extra multiplier, which is confidence, which allows you to underestimate or overestimate how much you believe you know on your, or how much you're confident you are on your assumptions. Again, this goes from 0 to 100%. 100% confidence means you're very secure on all the estimations you made. 0, ideally shouldn't be 0 because the calculation will be 0. You shouldn't be putting effort on 0 stuff. You always have some level of confidence, but the lower is you don't have enough data, you don't have enough experience, the team doesn't have experience, you don't actually know for sure if you can achieve that, etc. All right, it will influence your score. So the moment you multiply reach, impact, confidence, and divide by effort, you'll get a score, the RISE score. It's that simple. Remember, possible uses in terms of reach or events, 0 to 10 on the impact, 0 or 1 to 100% on confidence. And in terms of effort, you'll calculate the amount of people involved in the project times the number of days or weeks, depending on what's your scale. If you're building something big, maybe weeks. If you're building something small, maybe days. And you'll have a score. Now, if we do a very fictional exercise, LinkedIn, let's use LinkedIn instead of Uber for once. Imagine you'd be a product leader at LinkedIn across 3 teams, right? Or maybe not 3 teams, 1 team that is covering a bunch of topics. I think this is more correct. And the discovery showed that customers are potentially looking for 3 things: stories, because every social media gotta have stories; photo filters, again, every social media has to have photo filters; and very specific to LinkedIn, auto reading CV. So a technology that allows you to upload your CV, it automatically reads and automatically fills up your profile. And you'd run your RISE framework and you'd get something like this. Imagine stories would get 100 million customer reach because it would show up on PR, media would cover it. It would probably be mocked, but even when users are mocking something, it reaches more people. So very high reach. Unlike, for example, photo filters, which would be very small, only for people who are looking to change their profile photo, which doesn't happen that often. But when it does, they'll see the possibility of filtering. If you think about impact, the team is very confident at auto reading CVs will really influence the ability of creating more profiles, which connects to the mission of LinkedIn of getting more economic opportunity across the board. And again, filters, maybe the impact is very limited. They have some idea that they can influence some recruitment processes, but they'll put a 3. And if you go at effort before going confidence, if you go at effort, they're very confident that filters is super easy to build, a lot of frameworks already there. And on the other side, auto-reading CV is going to be hard. It's going to be using a lot of visual machine learning to auto-fill information. They'll have to adapt to a lot of different types of CV. So it's a lot of effort involved. So you calculate the score based on these, and you get auto-reading CVs top 27 points, stories 21, and photo filters 14. Giving you the order of priorities for the team, assuming it's going to tackle all of this, okay? So whenever someone comes to you and says, why are we doing auto-reading CVs and not my feature, photo filter, because this is what I believe we need. You can say, look, we calculated this way, these were the assumptions, this is how we made the math of what should come first, what should come next, and what should come later, and this is what the framework's saying, not me. Maybe you want to challenge some of our assumptions, and they can. But this is what we know today, right? This is how life may work. Now, a few tips on this, very important. Number 1, how can you increase the RISE score? Well, you can very easily see that if you maybe are more ambitious and try to reach more people, RISE score will grow. Maybe if you find ways of multiplying the impact of a feature, maybe closer to a very important KPI of the company, maybe the impact will go up. If you find more scope information, more confident about what actually is needed, maybe involve more senior people, maybe your effort will go down because people won't be as conservative on their estimations, RISE will go up. Or if you run more discovery, more prototyping, more research, more testing, you'll be more confident about your decisions. So confidence will go up and your RISE will go up. That's how. So whenever a stakeholder comes to you and says, hey, why is my feature with this score? What can I do to improve the score? This is what you can tell them. Get me more data. Improve my ability to think impact. Get me more information. Test my feature. So I'm more confident about the effort. All of these are things that can improve the score, and stakeholders should be allowed to challenge that score and go find ways of improving it. Clear on the RISE score? By the way, before going to the chat, did you know that LinkedIn actually has photo filters? I don't know if you were aware, but LinkedIn does have photo filters. If you go try changing your photo on your profile, you'll actually be able to use filters. And I had a conversation with a PM from LinkedIn about this. And it was very interesting, the reason why LinkedIn added photo filters, because it doesn't seem obvious. And what I was told is that there's a lot of people around the world that do not have the ability to get better photos, improve their images, right? And I don't know if you know, but one of the most subconscious decision proxies to whether continuing a profile process of a profile in a recruitment process is a photo. The photo subconsciously influences the probability of someone continuing or not a recruitment process. So the photo filters actually has an objective of improving how anyone can improve their photo on LinkedIn to optimize the probability that they move forward in the recruitment process, helping achieve LinkedIn's economic prosperity and economic opportunity mission. So weirdly enough, a very iceberg thing, a very futile maybe feature, filters, actually has a deeper inclusion aspect on LinkedIn. Make me wonder if there's not many of these things out there. So it's a very interesting process. All right, RISE is clear. We had a message on the chat. Is the confidence level one individual opinion, PM, or is an average of the confidence from the various elements of the team? So I think most of the time should be the average confidence of elements of the team. there should be a certain consensus of how confident the team is on a certain initiative. Okay, especially because the confidence on the estimations will come from engineering, the confidence on reach will come from a combination of marketing and product, the confidence on impact maybe will come from some data analysis. So it is an average of consensus. Sometimes a certain party will give the confidence level. Could be the PM, could be the engineering team, could be the design team, depends. But I would say that your best goal is to have a buy-in of confidence across the team, because the team will be building this. And if they don't believe in the estimations, they will more likely deliver it late, they'll deliver it with a subpar experience. So I always like to bring the team in and get an average confidence across the board. Some teams might be more conservative and they do a bit of what teams do for Fibonacci estimations on Scrum, where people give story points. Some companies use the worst estimation, that means being conservative, instead of the average across the group. You could also do this. You kind of measure the pulse of estimations of confidence across the team, and whoever has the worst confidence level, you use that one. So you're kind of protecting your own skin doing this, but oftentimes you'll have to balance with ambition, right? Because you always put like confidence super low and the scoring goes down. So, I mean, you have to balance, but I like bringing people in. And thank you for the question, Rodrigo. All right. Now we go to step number 3. Step number 3 is about making those priorities visible using the prioritization matrix or the prio matrix. The prio matrix is the most simple one. It's the one most people know. 2 axes, impact on one side, effort on the other. You have high impact, low impact, high effort, low effort, right? When you run this framework, you get 4 quadrants. You have quadrant 1, high effort, high impact, called big bets. These are the needle movers, the big things, the things that when you build them, they take time, they take people, they take effort, but your expectation of impact is quite high. Second quadrant, the beauty ones, the easy ones, the low effort, but the high impact probability. Those are the ones you probably want to go first. The third quadrant are the incremental. Incremental are low impact, but low effort. So you're not getting much, but you're also not paying much for the feature. And the quadrant you want to move away from, it's the money pit, the red one. High effort, you're paying a lot for it, but low impact, you're not really taking a lot of value out of that. Right? This is the prioritization matrix. Now you can already imagine that we calculated impact and effort. And maybe reach is a multiplier of impact, right? So we calculated impact and effort on the previous step. So we can easily map out where these things stand. So we can know if there's a high level of impact, like our auto reading CV, it goes up on the quadrants. If there's lower effort, it goes left. If it's high effort, it goes right? We can immediately start plotting where each initiative lands, knowing which quadrant they'll be. Now, where is confidence in the midst of all of this? Well, confidence will actually be inputted before we lay out our initiatives. Confidence makes us grow the money pit. Why? Because humans in product tend to overestimate how impactful their initiatives are and underestimate how much effort you got to put on each initiative. I actually have a rule of thumb called the 9x slap. The 9x slap is basically everything will take 3 times more, and by 3 times more, it means 3 times more effort to build, and will impact 1/3 of your expectation. That takes 9 times more effort and impact to achieve your main goal, right? And what it does by growing the money P, what it says is something will only be considered a big bet or an easy win if it's in the top percentile of impact, and something can only be considered an incremental or an easy win if it's in the lowest percentile of effort. Otherwise, it will end up being money pit, and you want to get away from that, at least from a prioritization perspective. That's how it goes. Now, you can ask, okay, I know easy win comes first and money pit comes last. Ideally, it doesn't come ever. But what's number two? So I think it depends as usual. In a smaller startup, probably number two would be a big bet because you want to move the needle. Like small stuff really doesn't get startups going. You want to be bold. You want to really risk it. It's almost a go big or go home. So big bets generally come after easy wins. In a larger, more mature company, often incremental comes number two. Why? Because there's a big machine and there's a lot of risk if you tackle big bets, right? Not to say that the time grows exponentially when you're in a big company. There's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of steps, committees, etc. So maybe it's better to add more incremental things to create progress, steady progress, rather than being too bold. All right, this is what I've seen talking to a lot of people, what generally comes next. And of course, the one that I didn't mention. So for startups, you go easy wins, big bets, incremental stuff. For maybe a large corporate, you go easy wins, incremental, big bets. All right, that's kind of the order. Okay, the prioritization matrix is extremely useful to make decisions visual because you might use RISE to show the math behind decisions, but you use a prioritization matrix for people to understand why something is considered an easy win, why something is considered a big bet, big investment, why something is just incrementally in terms of impact, and why you're not doing something because it falls in the money pit. Clear on the prioritization matrix? Yeah, cool. All right, no questions, that's good. Step number 4, because by now you might have an idea of what you're prioritizing. Maybe look at your resources and you pick the easy wins and maybe a big bet. Okay, it fits, right? But prioritization isn't just choosing what features or parts of the product you're going to be building. Good PMs also prioritize within the features. They prioritize what within the scope of what you're building makes sense or not. And for that, we use a tool called Moscow. Moscow stands for 4 buckets. First, the musts, must-haves. They are non-negotiable, vital requirements. Customers will not have their problem solved if you don't deliver that must. Value isn't delivered. Number 2, the S, is should-haves. Should-haves, although they're non-vital, meaning the customer can solve their main problem with it, they do add a lot of value. And this is where the customer will say, maybe you are competitive enough, I'm going to choose you or not. Oftentimes, the early adopters and innovators, they don't need the shoulds. But if you're growing the user base, especially if you're trying to cross the chasm, shoulds are essential for you to have. Number 3 are coulds, the C of Moscow. Could-haves are the nice-to-have features. Something that could be there. Doesn't have to be there. It's not a must. Shouldn't be there. It's not a should, but it really could be there. They're not vital, but it's a way to add and grow value over time. And finally, you have the won'ts, the W of Moscow. And the won'ts are things that you're not going to be doing for now. Doesn't mean that you will never do it. It means that for some reason, you won't cover them in this roadmap or in this prioritization. Won'ts are great ways to prevent scopes from creeping out and becoming complex. It also de-risks on your probability of delivering the roadmap. And scopes help you manage the expectations of people who gave requirements and ideas for them to know that that idea will not be done for now. So if we look at an example, imagine that you are launching Airbnb's first booking feature, right? Just launch Airbnb and you want to build it in a way that guests and hosts can book between themselves. So if you think, what is a must? What must happen in the product for a guest and a host to book a reservation between themselves? Well, first you got to connect them. Got to find a way to connect the guest with a host. Of course, you want to make sure availabilities are up to date, because if they aren't, you make a reservation and that house doesn't exist anymore. And you want to guarantee you capture key data that makes a host accept the reservation. Otherwise, if it's incomplete, they're not going to accept, therefore reservations don't happen. Those are musts. If you think about the shoulds, well, it should be within the Airbnb app, whether it's mobile or desktop, but it should be within the flow, right? Number two, it should allow a payment. Otherwise, how are you going to capture value? How do you guarantee that the reservation was indeed paid and they can lock it? And number three, they should allow to reject reservations, because if it's taken, I got to reject it. Otherwise, I won't trust that Airbnb is not going to flood me with guests that I need to reject. It's a bad experience. If we go to the could house, it could allow chatting between guests and hosts. It would decentralize a lot of the decision-making process. That's actually a very nice thing. It could support reservations for people booking via companies. So nice to have. Maybe I don't need to go to the company segment, but if I could, that wouldn't be bad for the business. And it could implement local payment methods for payments instead of just Visa and MasterCard or global payment methods. It could. It's a nice to have. People locally would be very happy. Maybe I'd increase local conversion rate. It's not vital. Most people have Visa and MasterCard. We definitely won't allow crypto right now. I mean, it's complex. We don't know how to work with it, legal standpoint. So we won't do that. We also won't allow you to do multi-location reservations, because we need to manage the trip and allow dates to be connected between different locations. Really complex. We won't do that now. And we won't allow to split payments right now. We assume most people book directly themselves. So, I mean, yeah, we have a percentage of people going in groups, but right now, we're not going to do split payments, keeping the payment options very simple. This is just a fictional example again of how you can discuss a scope of a feature using Moscow. I really recommend this, especially because whenever you have to write requirements, product requirement docs, something I recommend is you write it using Moscow. You actually write it down using Moscow. You write, we must connect a guest with a host, and we must make sure availabilities are up to date, and we must capture data. That immediately tells the team reading that requirement doc what must happen, what's a priority. Of course, when they read, we should do something, people already know, okay, we don't need to do it, but we should really look into this. When they read, we could do something, is, okay, if we have time, if we have find a way, if it's cheap enough, maybe we can add it. But that is not more important than must and should. So every time, the next time you're thinking about how do I write this into a story, into a PRD, try using must, should, could, and won't, part of the narrative. I think it'll be transformative in terms of your approach to scoping. Any questions on Moscow? Clear? All right, because with these 4 steps, okay, we have something on the chat. Let me open up. Never easy to get there. I see allowing for payment more of a must. You're technically right from a business perspective, but from a customer experience perspective, Airbnb wants to enable reservations to happen. So you could say, look, you don't pay via Airbnb. I'll find you a way to connect with the host, send you to a page, email that is maybe protected. A lot of marketplaces do this. They mask the email, but they allow them to communicate, and then they find a way to transact on that reservation. And because you own the masking of the email, you always have access to the conversation, so you can intervene, but you're not implementing payments. So that's one way of maybe keeping the scope smaller, simpler, because integrating payment methods could be a tricky thing, and still allow value to be delivered, connecting a guest with a host. So I think that is actually a really, I love to do these exercises where I map out a must, should, could, and won't, and people challenge why something should be or not in a specific column, because there's always a way to argue that the scope could be simpler. It's very easy to argue how something could be more towards the right, to the left, how something is very important. But I think that the very interesting challenge is arguing why something should be closer to the right than the left. Because one thing that never changes is how many resources and how much resources you have. You'll have less time, you'll have less people will be slower than you think, things will pop up in your roadmap that you weren't expecting, reducing capacity, all of that will happen. So the more you can fight for something to be on the right rather than on the left, the better you're doing your job as a PM. Awesome, Abbas, and appreciate your comment. Feel free to comment. It's always a way to give some more perspective on the frameworks. Cool. So we covered, okay, we have the chat. Rodrigo is asking, what's the time horizon that we need to think about when implementing the Moscow? I think that will be connected with roadmap. And I'll talk about that by the end of today's episode, which is road mapping and timelines around road mapping. Some companies use weeks, some companies use quarters, some companies think even further down the line, maybe a year or more to think Moscow. I think it depends a lot, but we'll talk about timelines on the road mapping parts. All right, Rodrigo? Cool. I hope you're happy with the non-answer I just gave. We'll go with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Okay. If we want to apply this approach, this 4-step approach to our Uber example, this would go like this. So we have our tree, remember this, and we prioritized initially. The first prioritization step is actually earlier than this. And we went to our solution space, right? We started discussing all the different possibilities of tackling the opportunities. And we landed on these main possibilities of solutions, the different models of transportation and segmentation of pricing for cheapest route, or maybe integration with credit card versus Uber credit card, etc. These are some of the ways we looked into solution space. Of course, we had to pick a few. So we did a RISE exercise, and we know our North Star. Our North Star is growing Uber rides, right? So we ran with our team, we took our engineering, design, data, research team all together to think about the reach, to think about the impact, to think about the effort and how confident we are. And we realized that credit card implementation would hit 100 million of our users, or thousands, or even index. You can even use reach as an index. We calculated the different impacts, and we know that credit card would be very impactful because people paying via simple format. We also know different modes of transportation have a very high impact level. When we looked at the efforts, so I always skip confidence. I like to leave confidence to the end. If we think about effort, credit card provider integration, rather simple. I mean, needs a few people, but it's a solid 10 units of time. If we think about rolling out a new model of transportation with smaller cars, integration on the app, different pricing, becomes very complex, but not as complex as a credit card, all the financial infrastructure, dealing with partnerships with banks, I mean, really complex. And if we think about the confidence we have, I mean, we know APIs. We looked into Stripe, maybe 95% confidence across the team, very different from credit cards, financial play, 25% confidence. Team is not super confident. So when we calculate all the scoring, this is what we got. So credit card, highest scoring, followed by pricing segmentation, but far away from that. And then maps integration coming close third. So you can see the calculations that are happening. This is an exercise you can run with teams. When we plot these, literally taking the impact versus effort column there, assuming confidence is already mapped with the growth area of our money pit, this is what we got. So clearly, credit card integration looks like an easy win there. Different models of transportation and segmentation of pricing coming close there, in maps getting closer as well to the easy win. So we can immediately see what can go to our roadmap there. And of course, a few things that are clearly out of the roadmap, like real low time location and credit card, because low effort, high impact, low effort, high effort, low impact. So immediately you can plot for the company, look, guys, this is what we believe we can do with the knowledge we have around the scope and the feature. All right. And if we think then about scoping each feature, and now I'm picking up maybe the integrating with credit card, and we run our Moscow. Of course, we would run our Moscow for the 4 features we believe we're going to be doing on the roadmap: maps, models of transportation, and segmentation. But we ran this exercise for our credit card. We see that we must integrate with an API. Right? We don't want to build that. There's a lot of compliance stuff we don't want to deal with. We know our core business, and it's not actually the payments for this situation. We gotta guarantee that the provider is certified on the PSD2 compliance level, and we gotta support Visa and MasterCard. They're the main payment methods. Now, we definitely should pass the engineering's assessment, right? It's not a must, but we really don't want to skip that. It should support multi-currency because we're present in multiple countries and people are not going to pay with euros or dollars everywhere, right? And it should support both mobile and desktop because that's where people ask for Ubers. What's a nice to have? Well, it could support local payment methods. Key markets would like it, but I mean, they already use MasterCard and Visa. They should be okay. It could be the cheapest fee, but we don't want to sacrifice reliability. Right, but the cheapest is a really good thing for our finance department, and it could be a multi-language experience. But if we need to roll out only for customers in English, I mean, that's fine. We can hack it through for now. It really could be a better experience for customers. And definitely we won't allow for crypto. I feel like crypto is a common theme. Don't do it. We don't allow crypto payments, right? And we won't centralize the flow in a single service for now. And we won't enable markets to customize the credit cards and adding their own fees and adding their own methods, etc. We won't do that for now. We'll keep it simple for now, right? So we easily design the scope of a potential feature to then go discuss it, see what's possible and what not using our prioritization metric. And of course, with this, you can immediately see not only you're prioritizing the most important features, but also you're prioritizing the most important parts of each feature. Suddenly, your limited resource can tackle much more. It's very different from tackling one feature across must, shoulds, and coulds versus maybe tackling 3 features just with musts. It makes your product much more complete in your probability of providing something valuable, increasing the value gap, tackling those early adopters is much higher because you can do a lot more. Right? Clear? I'm going to go with, no, silence is good oftentimes. I'm going to go with silence.
I have a question, Andrea.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. So I think my question is more related to how do you manage the engineers? So basically, how do you use this information to set the expectations and maybe get the resources that you need?
All right, so very important, and I know it's a wordplay. I don't manage engineers, PMs don't manage engineers, but I understand what you mean. Managing the relationship, the involvement of engineering, the buy-in. I think part number 1 and really important is bring them early in this discussion, right? I mean, they're going to be implementing this, their insights on the estimations of effort, their contribution around scope really, really matters, all right? That's step number 1 of getting them to buy into the decisions. Step number 2 is make your communication really understandable for them, right? Make it clear. Don't jargon them with business acumen that they'll either don't understand or they understand, but they really don't care. They want things to be straight shooters, right? Like, this is what matters. This is what it means, etc. And number 3, put a lot of the decisions on top of them instead of yourself. Like, I mean, this example is a great example. Like, it's very technical, like an integration with an API for credit cards. I mean, why don't they do the actual prioritization? Why are they not empowered to actually think about the must, shoulds, and the coulds and calculate the things, even run the RICE themselves? I mean, it's technical. Why shouldn't they own? I feel like if PMs own all of this process, you might only include them as a service rather than totally empowered parts of the team. So dividing this between, and I say engineers could be designers, researchers, data people, and PMs as well, of course. I think bringing in decentralizing that decision process gets them to be more bought into the process. That's how I manage in a certain sense. Does it make sense, Sean? Did I answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like team effort and the way you have to work together, do brainstorming, get information, align expectations as well.
Definitely.
So
That's definitely it. That's definitely it. Mariana, no problem. You'll catch the recording. Thank you for being here. Okay. Now, I always recommend something else, which is have questions. Again, and this is the thing, have questions that push things more to the right side of the prioritization. By the right side, I mean not doing things, all right? Because it's always easy to add more features. What's hard is to take out features, is to be confident with smaller scopes. And I love how Basecamp's Shape Up book talks about questions to challenge the scopes. And they ask questions like, is it really a must? Or is it just a should or a could? Can we really get away without actually building it? What will happen? What if we ship without it? What happens if we don't do this for the customer? Is this a new problem for them? Or do they deal with this pre-existing condition? And when they do, what do they do? How do they solve it? And what's the percentage of time if something happens? Do we really need to cover for that? Or are we just over-engineering, overthinking that it will happen and create a problem for us? Maybe we don't need to do it. And what's the risk of not delivering it? So all of these questions allow you to challenge the actual scope of the feature or even the entire prioritization. It pushes you to build less. Building less is better. You ship faster, you learn sooner, you course correct earlier. That's the goal with asking these questions. Cool? All right. With this, we wrap up our prioritization part of today. Cool. So before jumping into the next part, we'll do a 5-minute break. So we'll be back at 7:05 if you're in GMT or whatever your time zone, 05. 5 minutes, and then we'll jump into vision. Okay. We have a question before wrapping up. Rodrigo, go for it, and then we'll do our break.
Yeah, so what happens when we have like really like rice scores, rice results really near to each other? How do we make like a 1 point different decision making to being like all musts or all should?
That's a good question. So whenever you have a point difference, stick to the sorting. Like that's easy. I think harder is when it's equal numbers. How do you decide, right? I generally decide for those with the lowest effort because I know that low effort means I'll ship it faster and I'll learn much faster if I was right or not, right? Low effort means smaller build, quicker cycles, right? If not, I generally design a decision maker. Could be the PM, could be leadership, can be founder, can be a designer and engineer. We generally decide decision makers. And if we have a tie, the decision maker will decide what goes into the roadmap. All right. I generally go with the lowest effort because, again, shipping faster will make you learn sooner, right? And in terms of what's really a must, again, I'll run these questions to make sure we can bring stuff out of the must so that the true must survive. I think that's the exercise. This is what I do. Cool.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Andre.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Rodrigo. Okay, so I'm promoting our break until 7:07 instead of 05 because we had a great question from Rodrigo. I'll see you in 5 minutes for the second half of today. See you in a bit. All right, we're back to the second half of today's session. I hope pace is going well. I hope content is being clear, because I know this is a hard part. Today's session is tricky, a lot of subjectivity in the topics we're covering. Prioritization is one of them. There's a famous quote from Jobs. I don't think I have it in my presentation, but Jobs says that a lot of people confuse prioritization with just focusing on the thing you're doing. It's more about saying no to hundreds of good ideas around the thing you're doing. I think that's the hard part about, and letting the prioritization frameworks and process do that for you will keep you sane as a product manager. All right, let me bring back my slides again, because now we're going to jump into storytelling. We're going to jump into how to build a product vision that rallies people around. Because even if you have a strong prioritization process, you still need to convince people around you, to choose your idea, to choose your approach to prioritization, to choose your product. And you do that by building a product vision. Now, I love this Jeff Bezos quote, be stubborn on your vision, but flexible on the details, right? Stubborn on vision is where we're going to start. Flexible on details is about strategy. We'll go to that later. Stubborn on vision. Now, what's a product vision? A product vision is as simple as the story you tell of the future you want to get to. It's making that future clear to everyone's point of view, to everyone's vision, so that they can bet on you, so that they can bet on the product. Now, my choice of company for the following slides might be a bit controversial, because not a lot of people believe in Meta, not Facebook, but Meta, right? A couple of months ago, you saw, or maybe last year already, you saw an evolution of Facebook, right? Before, Facebook's mission was to make the world more open and connected. Now, everyone that is within tech kind of knew some of these wording. But a couple of months ago, Facebook reinvented itself, changing their mission. And this is something that happens very rarely, especially at such large companies. They completely revamped, rethought themselves into Meta, and redesigned their mission to give the people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Now, with a new mission, you need to have a new vision, because the vision is how you see the future when you achieve your mission. But making a vision clear, it's all about the narrative. And that narrative is codified by, in this case, Mark, saying things like, in many ways, the metaverse is the ultimate expression of social, or things that are a bit more specific, like creating avatars and digital objects are going to be central to expressing ourselves. Of course, you want to also put your own thoughts into the experience, like defining quality of metaverse is a feeling that you're really there with someone else, another person, or in another place, right? Creating this Ethereum experience. And you want to connect this to your past, like this virtual environment will be accessible by all devices and headsets, including those who aren't built by Facebook. So it connects the story, but also how you're going to live that vision. And finally, can end with a very futuristic vibe, because the vision is always about the future. Like, you'll be able to teleport between different experiences. With all of this, with these statements, affirmations, Mark tries to show what is his vision for Meta, his vision of the future, the story he's telling, and why he believes this is how they'll succeed in the mission to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. So your goal as designing a vision is this: how do you tell the story of that future? That's what you want to do for your product. Now, a vision is what helps bridge the gap between the company's purpose and the strategy of the product. It's what connects both. So you start with a company's reason of existence. So take Visa, for example, to be the best way to pay and be paid for everyone. Or Disney, to be the world's leading producer and provider of entertainment. This is where you start. Now, your vision needs to connect with this. How to make Visa, through technology, the best way to pay and be paid, or how to make Disney, how to build products that allow Disney to continue being that leading producer and provider. And that will take you to product decisions and strategies like launching streaming, Disney Plus, that became suddenly a early winner, rookie winner, growing significantly. Or like Visa, with investing in Ethereum wallets and investing in blockchain startups and crypto startups, because they know that crypto and blockchain is a big part of allowing people to be paid and pay for the world. It's part of the future. So that's why this vision, both at product and company level, is really important for you to make proper product decisions. But I don't know, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Disney is going to be 100 years next year. It was created in 1923. Next year, 2023, 100. And right now, Disney Plus is growing so fast that analysts say that Disney Plus, a product created 5 years ago, now accounts for 50% of the entire value of Disney, 50% of the market cap. So a product built 5 years ago is 50% of the value of a company that's turning 100. This is the power of having a proper vision aligned with a proper product strategy. This is how much value you can create. You could argue that Disney would be worth half of it if it wouldn't invest it in Disney Plus. So this is how big a proper strategy aligned with the proper vision can be. So how do you do this? Well, let's follow a few principles, 4 principles specifically. First, start from why. Remember Sinek with his start from why, the golden circle, right? Centered on customers. Why are you doing this? Number 2, think big, especially if you connected with your North Star. Why are you even here? 3, flexible on the strategy and ideally adapted to specific timeframes. You got to understand that you know where you want to get to, but there's different ways to get there. And number 4, informed by trends. Because trends, market trends, industry trends influence where people go. If people decide to go somewhere, you don't want to be blind to that. You want to adapt yourself. So to make these principles a bit clearer, we're going to use someone who's, well, maybe the most famous person in the world right now, Elon Musk, right? How is Elon Musk applying this product vision across all his companies? I don't have Twitter included in this. I need to think a bit more about how to make Twitter part of this narrative, but I'm going to include all the companies before the acquisition. So first start with why. So if you actually look at every single company that Elon Musk is involved with, either as a founder, CEO, or just someone funding the company, they all connect with this transversal why of making the human race prosper and thrive. If you think about Tesla, bit of a climate change approach, electrification, changing a very hard industry, kind of influence all other industries to turn into a more electric or less reliant on fossil fuels. If you think about SolarCity, kind of the same, but for housing. If you think about the Boring Company drilling tunnels to help cities become larger, because if you make a city larger, because transportation is faster, GDP, gross domestic product, how much money each country generates grows. There's the biggest correlation with growth of GDP. OpenAI, which I don't think he's involved anymore, but had this mission of creating protocols to keep artificial intelligence from dominating Earth, making it safer for everyone. And the last plan B, which is if we fail on all ends, we have SpaceX to get us out of here, make us multiplanetary, right? So all of these companies connect with making the human race better, thriving, and hopefully surviving as long as possible. Then how to think big? I mean, I think everyone has seen Musk talk about Mars, colonizing another planet. I mean, can you think bigger than that? Literally colonizing another planet. I think that's as big as maybe you can think of. It really rallies people to join the company, to buy products that help fund this initiative as part of his goal. Flexible strategy. There's a company called Starlink. Became quite famous in the last couple of months with the ongoing war. But Starlink in reality is a quick spin-off of SpaceX. And the reason behind it is, well, getting to Mars is actually pretty expensive, right? And there's only 2 ways to fund a company. Either you raise capital, meaning you give equity of your company to investors, or you build a business that pays for it. Now, getting to Mars has very long timelines. People won't get to Mars tomorrow. And investors, well, they like to see their money. Even long-term investors tend to wait about 10 years for their money. 10 years is a short timeline for Mars. So they need to fund it via business. And what they realize is, well, there's actually a lot of business in telecom. And if they're already carrying rockets to space, maybe they can carry satellites, which can build a telecom service, maybe even a better telecom service than the existing ones. And there's a lot of money in telecom, whether you believe it or not. So that's the flexible strategy. Let's fund through Starlink our ability to get to Mars. And number 4, informed by trends. So if you see one of Elon Musk's latest pitches is that he wants to put Tesla as a ride-sharing company and self-driving ride-sharing company. So that informs Tesla's own vision that they need to go into a less car ownership type of future. So this is just a way, not a dull way of showing how Elon Musk connects all of these principles to design a storyline that makes people connect with the companies. Now, this isn't the only way to design a vision. Another way is to use something I call the common enemy. So the common enemy framework basically picks enemies of an industry and turns them to customers, making you the anti-enemy, the savior. Suddenly, you inherit every single anti-pattern of an industry. And that's very powerful. Some say that common enemies are more powerful than common goals. Some examples. So Uber uses very well with taxi industry. They made the taxi industry the common enemy that everyone would rally against and promote Uber as the way to bring better taxis into the world. Revolut did the same with banks. They showed how banks, traditional branch-based banks, and their products were just awful. They're not as good as what Revolut could build. Wise, previously known as TransferWise, did the same with exchange companies that would charge a lot of money to send money from one country to another. And they used a lot of the narrative of people who are sending money from one country to another are usually families who are torn apart. Someone in the family had to go abroad to work, so to send money back to the family who is living in a worse condition, and they're charging a lot of money to these people. We can't let that happen. So they use that common enemy narrative as well. And the last, Robinhood, with the greedy Wall Street broker who's keeping the young people away from financial markets, making them wealthier and putting that only the 1% to use this narrative to bring the commission-free product to the world. And the beauty about using common enemies is that suddenly people look at the enemy and think, oh, the opposite is what the future should look like. So that's your vision. Suddenly it makes your narrative, your storytelling much, much easier for consumers and customers to understand. That's the goal. Of course, landing on this narrative, on this future is not easy as well. How do you invent the future? Like some visionary founders are able to, that's great, but we're not all visionary founders, right? And we need to think about what could the future look like? I love one exercise from Airbnb called the 11-star experience. And Brian explains this to Reid Hoffman on Masters of Scale. And it starts with a 5-star experience. And it starts because it works for Airbnb as hotels, but you could use this exercise for any industry, because we can say 5 stars is your product, your business, your experience just working great, working as people expect. So I'm going to let Airbnb founder and CEO Brian explain this. Give me a thumbs up if you hear the sound.
5-star experience is you knock on the door, they open the door, they let you in. Great, that's not a big deal. You're not going to tell every friend about it. You might say, I used Airbnb, it worked. So we thought, what would a 6-star experience be? A 6-star experience, you knock on the door, the host opens, hey, I'm Reid, welcome to my house. You're the host in this case. And you would show them around, and on the table would be a welcome gift. It would be a bottle of wine, maybe some candy. You'd open the fridge, there's water, you go to the bathroom, there's toiletries, and the whole thing is great. That's a 6-star experience. And you'd say, wow, I love this more than a hotel. I'm definitely gonna use Airbnb again. It worked, better than I expected. What's a 7-star experience? Knock on the door, Reid Hoffman opened, get in, welcome. Here's my full kitchen. I know you like surfing. There's a surfboard waiting for you. I've booked lessons for you. It's going to be an amazing experience. And by the way, here's my car. You can use my car. And, I also want to surprise you, but I got you, this is the best restaurant in the city of San Francisco. I got you a table there. And you're like, whoa, like this is way beyond. So what would a 10-star check-in be? A 10-star check-in would be the Beatles check-in in 1964. I'd get off the plane and there'd be 5,000 high school kids cheering my name with cars welcoming me to the country. I'd get to the front yard of your house and there'd be a press conference for me. And I would be just a mind experience. So what would an 11-star experience be? I would show up at the airport and you'd be there with Elon Musk and you're saying you're going to space.
All right, so you see what happened here, right? First of all, there's a lot of Musk fans, even Brian Chesky is one. But what happened here with this exercise, the cool part of it is that you're marginally growing the future of your product. It's not asking you to think, what's your product in 10 years? That's the hard part. That's maybe maybe not the 10, but maybe a 9 or 8 stars. But you don't need to start there. You can start with 6 and then grow to 7 and then grow to 8 and grow to 9 iteratively. You're rethinking what's better, what's great, what's amazing. When you suddenly see yourself on the 9 or 10 or even 11, you see, wow, this would be insane. Of course, the 10 and 11 is more of a throw clay to the wall and see what sticks and go crazy, right? But the beauty about the 10 and 11, it makes the 6 and the 7 and the 8 much more feasible. And if you think about Airbnb, the 6 and the 7, they already exist today. From experiences that allow you to book stuff, to using data to promote and give guests and hosts a better customized experience. All of that is actually today's 5-star experience of Airbnb, right? So I really recommend you running this type of exercise. Also recommend you seeing this entire episode. It's masterful. But I think this 11-star experience is a great way to experience and design, especially a vision in group, as a team. The final framework to build your vision is to use Amazon's working backwards PR exercise. So it's very famous from Amazon, which is for every new initiative, you start by writing a press release. So a press release of what you'd like your product to be written by media when it launches. And you do that on day 1 before you start building anything. And you follow exactly how a PR, a press release, would follow. You have the product name, you have the customer you're looking to solve for, the problem it solves and how you frame it, the benefits for the customer. You even have quotes, both from a person in the company as well as a potential customer, what you'd like them to say, the positioning. You tell how people are going to access it, how they're going to buy it, what's the price. And based on the framework, you also add FAQs answering business, technical questions, positioning questions. So it's a very complete exercise that focuses on what the future looks like. Again, it's a structured approach to telling others and codifying how you see the future of a product. As a bonus, you have the slide, you'll have the slides and you have a template. You click here. It's based on the actual template from the Working Backwards book written by former Amazonians. I passed it to a Google Doc. You can copy it for you. It's noted and has comments on each area, what each area means. You can use it for your own exercises. Really recommend. I think these are all great ways for you to design, build, and execute on a vision that gets you people to believe, gets people around you to believe in your strategy. Cool, makes sense in terms of vision? All right, awesome, cool. Now we go to the next step, because after vision, we got to design a strategy, right? And I love Melissa Perry's quote, a good strategy is not a plan, it's a framework to make decisions, right? The plan is the roadmap. We'll talk about that later on today. Strategy is the framework to make decisions. Remember, Meta? So I think this was 2015 or 16, I'm not 100% sure. But Mark, when it was still Facebook, presented this slide in a very massive screen. I'd love to have that screen. Look at that beautiful thing. 10-year roadmap, right? And what do you see there is both the connection of vision with strategy. Let's go more in detail. This is what Mark showed, 2016. It showed 10 years strategy. It's a combination of where Facebook's going and what products Facebook is building and why and how all of them connect. Strategy is this. It's connecting your vision with how you're going to get there. And if you think about it, Mark wasn't that off. If you think about, we're here, so we're getting close to 2023. For those who don't know, we're like a month and a half away. Sorry to give you the bad news. 2022 is almost gone, but we're basically there, right? And it's actually come together. We had Facebook, then a lot of it was invested in Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, groups, all of that grew to more than 1 billion user products. And now 2023, products like connectivity, drones, they invested significantly about that, telco, infra, especially in countries like India, AI. Every other month you see a new launch from Facebook around vision and language AI. And the biggest of them all, VR, AR on the bottom, mobile VR, Oculus, which back was called Rift, Touch, social VR, which is now actually the entire company transitioning to Horizon Worlds. So Mark's vision and strategy is actually coming together even 7 years after this presentation. So you see the importance of strategies connecting where you want to go with the decisions you're making. Of course, the most fundamental principle of strategy is that strategy happens in the opportunity space. The mistake number one, a lot of product people do, and maybe the most important thing I learned as I went from product manager to product leader, is that in the past, I used to think strategy was the solutions I chose. And that's wrong. Strategy are the opportunities you choose. Strategy is the opportunities that are more likely to deliver on the outcome you're chasing. Because you won't have resources to tackle every single opportunity ahead of you. You got to choose. The ones you choose are your strategy. Then, after choosing that, you'll have your roadmap, your solution space. But strategy is choosing the opportunities. So where do I spend most of my time when thinking about opportunity choices? 3 things. First, I think about focus. What are the right opportunities? How do I think about right? Like what connects, what increases the likelihood of achieving an outcome? The second thing are insights. What are the right insights, data, information that allows me to choose the right opportunities? And number 3, what actions will allow me to guarantee I'm choosing the right opportunities? Is it research? Is it discovery? Is it testing and prototyping? Is it going and talking with customers? Is it listening, leadership, management, founders? What are the actions I have to do to make me choose the right opportunities? This is where I spend most of my time when I'm thinking about product strategy. Remember Tesla? It felt like when I presented Tesla early on today, the strategy was so clear, so straight line. You build a low volume car, more expensive to pay to a less expensive car, medium volume, so that you get to the high volume car, less expensive, large addressable market. It seems so straight line, but rarely it's never like that. There's a lot of curves. Maybe you don't see them. Maybe the company doesn't promote them as often. But even for Tesla, there are 2 areas that are definitely a curve in the straight line strategy. First, Tesla announcing that they're going to start mining, going into mines. Why? Because they don't have producers of lithium with the volumes they need for them to achieve their results. It's not enough. They got to do it themselves. They got to vertically integrate. The second one is, well, Tesla's Model 3, the affordable car, still costs 50, 60,000 in most countries. That is not affordable on the definition of affordability. It's not yet affordable to every single person. So Tesla's going into ride sharing, self-driving ride sharing. I don't know if you know, but data shows that your car sits idle 94% of the time. You only actually use it for 6% of the time. 94% is either parked in your garage, in your street, whether when you're sleeping, at home, in the office. What Tesla is actually proposing is using self-driving technology to make your car turn into an Uber or a taxi and drive alone throughout the day. And you are actually earning money. They actually argue that not only the car will be free for you, you can actually make profit every single year from owning a car. Suddenly, they can literally get you a free Tesla as long as you ride on the network every day. That's the power of that vision. Again, another curve, but a necessary one for them to achieve the ambitious goals of making Tesla the most sold car in the world. And by the way, on the lithium, do you know another reason beyond production volume? You see there in pink or purple, red, and blue, all the OPEX, cost of capital, cost of labor, the cost of Tesla going in conversion to the smallest amount value possible with scale. Weekly units produced going over 10K. There's only one thing that is going down, which is the cost of materials, because there's not enough volume. There's a limit on economies of scale. So to make the achievable cost lower than those 20K that you see there, to make it really affordable, they have to vertically integrate the cost of materials and actually getting that economy of scale, getting them down. That's another reasoning, right? So if you don't do that, you'll never achieve your own objective. And I want to take this specific slide to bridge into my next part, which is business model. Because a product manager, a successful PM, needs to understand the business behind the product. If you don't understand the business behind the product, you won't be able to prioritize and choose a strategy that delivers on that business. Because remember, part of the role of a PM is to help the company become more valuable, right? So a product strategy needs to influence the business model the same way that the business model influences the product strategy. Now, I'm not going to go deep into different business models. I mean, you know many of them. Maybe I'll highlight 6, like ads, large scale, social media companies use it significantly. Affiliation, where maybe you have some content, a niche audience, and you enable transactions and take a cut. Transactional models, well, you sell directly to consumers. Subscriptions, monthly, yearly, can be business like Salesforce, can be consumer like Netflix. Channel sales, where you partner with a retail agent and you sell through them. Freemium models, maybe you have a free tier and a paid tier, maybe you have in-app purchasing. All of those are freemium model approaches. What matters is you understand how you make money and what it costs to make money, right? And the best framework to map this out is called the Business Model Canvas, BMC. Probably you've seen this before. It's a very old framework, but it works really well. Now, I want to highlight 2 things. First, the actual business model is the bottom of that chart. There's a reason why it covers the entire bottom. You have cost structure, how much it costs to run the product or the company. And you have the revenue stream, how much money and how you make that money, right? The second thing that not a lot of people actually notice is that the top part influences the bottom part. Your decisions on the top, decisions around customer segments, the channels you acquire those customers, the relationships you have to have with them, the partners that you work with to generate the value, the resources and activities that you run in the company, and in the end, in the center, the value proposition that you want to deliver. All of that will have an impact on your cost structure as well as how much revenue you can make. So you as a PM, you have to understand every top part of this PMC, and you've got to ask questions and make decisions that will influence these. Questions like which segment delivers more revenue and margin, or which channels are more expensive or cheaper to acquire a customer from, and how does my value connect with resources and activities? What's the cost of delivering different parts of the value? How much money can I make from adding this value to my product? All of these things will influence your business model, and you got to understand them. And I personally believe if you own the business model canvas, if you understand the business behind your product, you'll be much better at making decisions that will drive more revenue and more revenue streams at a lower cost structure. And in the end, will make you a more successful product manager. That's also part of the product strategy. Your decisions here will influence your product strategy. Is this clear? Cool. Because this is something that really differentiates a strong PM from others. A lot of PMs I see, they focus a lot on the building features, the designs, even the research. Not a lot of are thinking almost like the CEO. So that quote, I don't like CEO of the product. You might not have the authority, but at least if you do this, if you act like the true CEO, someone who owns a profit and loss P&L, you're more likely to be a successful PM than not. All right, so we covered decision-making, prioritization. We covered vision, telling the future. We covered strategy, choosing the opportunities to get to that future. Now we need to design our plan. And our plan is designed via a roadmap, product roadmap. And I love the quote, a goal without a plan is just a wish. Very old quote, but a very correct one. That plan, your roadmap, is crucial for you to achieve it. Now, what is a roadmap? Let's use Marty Kagan's definition of a roadmap. A roadmap is a prioritized list of features and projects of a product team for a specific time frame. I think it's beautiful. It's intact. It's short. It covers a lot of the things we talked about: prioritization, features and projects, ownership, product team, and time frame. Specific time frame. I generally add just a few extra things. A roadmap is a communication tool. It's nothing other than that. It's not the end goal. It's not the purpose of a PM's existence. It's a way to communicate with people two things: what will and what won't be built. It's your way of managing people's expectations within that specific time frame. I generally say that happiness, customer happiness, stakeholder happiness, business happiness, is the positive difference between expectations and reality. When you beat expectations, meaning the reality is better than expectations, you generate happiness. If reality is worse than expectations, you generate unhappiness, right? You want to generate happiness across the board. That means you're delivering, right? Roadmaps allow you to do that. So what framework do I use for road mapping? I use Now, Next, Later. It was created, if not mistaken, by Jane Basto in the product mind team. And it's a very simple framework that uses 3 buckets. Now, which generally are the next 4 weeks. There's an asterisk there because larger companies generally don't operate in weeks, they operate in months. So you can actually replace weeks with months. 4 months or 4 weeks. You can also do 3 months, which is like a quarter. So 4 months or a quarter, depending on the size of the company. And that's your now. This is where you have more visibility. You know the scope, you know the features. Maybe you've designed everything or close to everything. You've broken down into the main stories, you know the initiatives. So it's very clear. The now is very clear. It's what people are working on. More unclear, and where you probably will spend most of the time, is on the next. The next are the next 4 to 12 weeks, small company, or 4 to 12 months, or 2 to 4 quarters till the end of the year, bucket. And these are things that you're still gathering requirements, you're still asking questions, still scoping. Probably you're testing prototypes, validating. You're also thinking on technical architecture, like what you know, what you don't know. You're trying to understand what makes sense to become a now. And then last is your later, also known as an icebox. That's why there's an ice cube there. And that's generally 12 weeks, small company, or 12 months out, more than a year for a larger company. This is where you run research, you ideate, you try to think what the future could look like. There's space for innovation. And again, you're thinking, how can I gather information that makes staffing a next? And the beauty about this, it's an always rotating roadmap because there's always a now, there's always a next, and there's always a later. It manages people's expectations. It makes it clear. And at the same time, is a very simple framework. It allows you to focus on research, discovery, validation, and not actually designing very complex Excel sheet-based roadmaps with a lot of dependencies and a lot of complexity that often a lot of businesses want. This makes it simple. And you like simple, as you've seen across all the frameworks I bring. Simple gets you time because you're going to be covering so many different things that you really want time. Is this clear in terms of framework for roadmap? Still have a few more tips on road mapping, but this is the base framework. Is it clear? Cool. Thumbs up is good. Thank you, Abbas. It's perfect. Now, looking at the reality and how all of these kind of comes together, intersects together. Well, first you start with your prioritization, right? You ran your prioritization matrix, you see your quick wins and your big bets, your incremental, and let's assume that on your roadmap, you'd say, we're going to tackle feature A and feature F. So you run your Moscow and you see your musts, your shoulds, and your coulds for both. You have your requirements there. So how do you map these against your roadmap? Well, generally, in a very simplified version, of course, reality then becomes a bit more complex. But in a simplified version, you would be prioritizing both the musts of your feature A as well as the musts of your feature B. Those are your nows. This is the things you want to tackle to bring those two features in terms of pure value to your roadmap. Next, you'd tackle probably your shoulds around feature A and feature B, right? So those are your next. And immediately later would come your nice to haves. Of course, as you ship your musts and even your shoulds, you're going to be learning new things, and those might replace your next, your laters, right? So it's an ongoing rotating roadmap as you learn, right? That's the goal. Okay, so this is how you map. This is how you optimize your now, your next, and your later to the most important things across the most important features. This is how you optimize impact versus effort. Now, a couple of tips before we wrap up on roadmaps. First, if you actually use opposite tree, the template I showed you how to break down or how to expand your opportunity solution tree, your roadmap is actually the bottom part of your opposite tree. It's the solution space there, broken down in initiatives, again, broken down in tasks and layered with execution. That is your roadmap. So if you use this framework, you'll actually get a really good broken down roadmap. Then you only need to layer it on the prioritization, but you have half of the work or half of the job done. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is to think about roadmaps as three parallel tracks. Track number one is discovery, right? Discovery is always happening. It doesn't happen in a moment in time and then stops. You should always be discovering. And then as you discover, you're going to feed what's called the build track. The build track, again, is where people are developing stuff, they're building stuff, they're designing stuff, they're testing stuff. All of that is being fed by discovery and it's ongoing. Of course, as you ship what you build, going to be feeding a measurement track. The measurement track is when you track what works and what doesn't. You see the metrics, you see if your assumptions worked or not. That's the measurement track, right? At the moment of the quarter, this is the most normal thing to happen. The measurement track is going to feed the discovery track because by now you've discovered enough throughout what you ship. And again, it re-loops again. Your discovery becomes part of your build track becomes part of your measurement, and on and on and on. So this is how a roadmap is a continuous roadmap. All right, that's what Agile kind of promotes, a continuous roadmap of discovery and deployment. Now, there are some typical mistakes companies do on road mapping. The first mistake is product teams are often informed of what the roadmap should look like. They make product teams feel like it's a shopping list. Oh, the C-level suite wants this and wants that, and the founders want this, and the investors want that. And by the way, the sales team wants this feature, and the marketing team wants that feature. It makes the product team almost as a note taker of stuff that needs to be built. The reality, the good reality, where you should be going towards is more of a outer layer of hypothesis, of data, of feedback that feeds the product team, as well as the KPIs and the objectives of each department that is trying to make the product successful. That feeds the product team so that they make proper product decisions on what to build. Now, I'm saying this because if you join a product team or a company as a product manager, I want to be clear to you, it's very likely that you find the left type of reality. Now, it's very important that you, alongside the product organization, work day and night to bring the organization closer and closer to the right type of road mapping. That's the goal, all right? But it's a process. I generally say that 50% of the job of a PM is to build the machine, the product. 50% is to build a machine that builds the machine, the processes, the approaches, the tools, the frameworks. This is that second 50%. A second typical mistake is that generally roadmaps are designed and decided like the left chart, where leadership tends to decide the functionalities and the features. Then they kind of feed that into a product manager to explain them in a PRD. Then they inform designers on what needs to be designed, and finally gets to engineers to code what needs to be coded. This is a top-down road mapping process. Again, very common. Now, a good process is more like the one on the right side, where it combines both the top-down and the bottom-up approach. On the top, leadership shows what opportunities are the best opportunities tied to the most important results and outcomes. And they challenge the product team to come up with a solution space tied to the opportunity space that optimizes the probability of seizing those opportunities and delivering on the outcomes. And then both meet in the middle, where they agree on scope, basically what are the expectations of what the product should do. They agree on resources, how much people and money we have to invest on the product, and agree on timelines. When is an expectation of delivering this? On this process, which I call a meet in the middle process, you get agreement, you get buy-in, you get expectations managed, which is much better than the process on the left. Does this make sense? Again, it's not easy because it involves some political level of effort, but it will yield better products, better roadmaps, happier people. This is my recommendation. Cool. Any questions on road mapping or anything we talked today? Now is the time for Q&A. Anything? All clear? Wow. This was a smooth session. It's all clear. Amazing. Because then it's done. Okay, Carlos. Carlos has a question. Okay, I'm going back. Carlos, go for it.
Yeah, so currently there's like a trend of new cloud tools for product management.
Yeah.
That embrace some of the areas that we saw here, like prioritization, roadmaps.
Yeah.
Tools like Product Board, AHA roadmaps. Do you have any feedback, any experience with those products?
I do. I've used most of them. I used Product Board, I used AHA, I used even the Jira road mapping for products. I've used a bunch of them. I used spreadsheets in Excel. I've used Notion. So I've as we say in Portuguese, badly translated, rotated a lot of chickens. So what do I think about that? I think more important is that you use something that organizes your work, your vision, your strategy, and successfully brings it to the team and they understand, right? That's the most important principle. Whatever you use, as long as it works, getting your team executing, honestly, I don't care what you use. 2, some frameworks and tools are more rigid, some are less rigid. For example, Product Board, which I love, and I know the founder. is beautiful. It's an amazing tool. It's super complete, but it's very rigid. You got to kind of use it on a very specific way. They allow you to customize quite a few things, but it's quite rigid. It's not simple to understand, but it's amazing. It's very complete. If you have no idea about how products should be structured from a tool perspective, I generally recommend Product Board. It's a very expensive tool, by the way, but I think it works very well. Now, for me, I like flexibility extensively. I really like to be flexible, and I use Notion extensively. Notion, I have all my frameworks, all my product roadmaps, all my decision and vision approach, all built on Notion, and I have customized for myself. So I like Notion because it's very flexible, allows me to almost freeform write. We do stories, we do mapping, Moscow, vision, Gantt, all of that on Notion. It works really well. So again, I can't say whether one tool is better than the other. I know a lot of people use Jira because it's deeply connected with the epics. I think it works really well. I love what Jira did for road mapping with their Gantt. Though I don't use Gantt a lot for road mapping, but I understand why they did that. So I think it depends a lot. As long as you use something that you're comfortable, I use the same approach for prototyping. It doesn't matter so much what you use as long as you do it, whatever makes you comfortable.
Okay, thanks for the feedback.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Carlos. Any more questions?
I have another one.
Go, Mario.
Do you consider initiatives brought by compliance or even security teams typical mistakes as well?
Initiatives brought by compliance or a mistake?
Or,
I didn't follow.
Or even security. Yeah, you mentioned on the previous slide.
Yeah. Okay.
That initiatives that are brought by teams on the company are typical mistakes, but when we are talking about compliance or security, is that matter?
Well, you could put the compliance or a security risk as an hypothesis, right? There's a reason why you're building something to make the product more secure or compliant. Because if you don't, there's a risk. There's an hypothesis of you getting fined or being outruled by a market or not being accepted by a customer because you're not compliant with something. That's an hypothesis. So technically, it's not a request from a team. It's an hypothesis put on the table by a certain team that maybe has a KPI. For example, security might have a no hack or no loss of customer data, etc., as their KPI, and they'll bring that to the table as a requirement, and you should assess it. So it's not so much like on the left. Again, it's semantics, but it matters, right? Because that risk should be factored in as any other risk, right? Maybe it's a cost. That cost will increase the expense of a company. So I can look at it like an hypothesis and maybe a KPI of a team. So I definitely don't see that as a mistake. It's actually a very important topic to be tackled.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Awesome, Mario. Appreciate the question. So we have something on the chat. Chat is a message for myself. All right. Any more questions for the group? No more questions? We're good? All right. And by the way, for the person who sent me a DM, I'm going to send you a message on Slack. Cool. That means that we are done with session 3, 5 minutes ahead of schedule. It's beautiful. For those who haven't had dinner like myself, we're going to get dinner earlier. It's awesome. Again, hope you enjoyed session 3. I hope I'm still matching expectations after 3 weeks. That's my goal. Next week, we're going to have our last session. I told you, time flies so fast. That's ridiculous. And for those who stick till the end, we're going to be talking with Tim Gregory. Tim Gregory is a head of product at multi-unicorn company Kazoo, based out of London. Tim manages the merchandising at a lot of product teams. He's a former OLX product director. He's been in the product industry for more than 15 years, if not mistaken. Tim's an amazing person. He's joining us on Thursday as our speaker on the Lunch and Learn. So a product leadership guest. We're going to be talking a lot of what we talked today. I have special questions for Tim. I hope you get to join us lunchtime, 12:45 GMT. It's going to be a very cool session. And then back on Monday for our final session. I'll share the recording on our Slack channel as all sessions. You can always catch on our private Slack channel the recordings, as this one will be shared by Pietrich soon. I hope you enjoyed. Again, really appreciate you being here. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great week. Great start of the week. Almost in December. Man, time flies fast. Cheers, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Andre.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.